$30,000. Dr. Reynolds' words hung in the air of the cramped hospital consultation room. That's what the experimental treatment costs. Without it, Caleb has maybe 6 months. Alara Thorne gripped the edge of her plastic chair, knuckles white. There has to be another option. I'm sorry, Ms. Thorne. We've exhausted all conventional treatments. The clinical trial at Boston Medical is his only chance. Outside in the corridor, Alara pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, watching rain streak down the pane. 3 jobs, and she still couldn't make rent most months. $30,000 might as well be $30 million. Her phone buzzed. A text from her boss at the diner. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. We're overstaffed. Which meant she'd complained once too often about late paychecks. That was job number 2 gone this month. In Caleb's room, her 12-year-old brother slept, thin chest rising and falling beneath the hospital blanket. Their mother sat beside him, vacant-eyed, twisting a tissue between her fingers. She hadn't been right since Dad's accident at the Ravenswood steel mill 2 years ago. I'll figure something out, Alara whispered, though neither heard her. The subway ride back to their apartment in the east side of Ravenswood was a blur. Alara's mind raced through increasingly desperate options. Credit cards already maxed, no collateral for loans. Their only family a distant aunt in Arizona who never returned calls. The apartment was freezing. The heating had been out for 3 days. Alara went through the mindless routine, checking mail, mostly bills, microwaving leftover pasta, scrolling job listings on her cracked phone screen. An email notification caught her eye, from Jenny, her only friend who'd escaped Ravenswood for a marketing job in Manhattan. Alara saw this and thought of you. They're desperate for people. Weird concept, but big money involved. Attached was a link to something called the Blackwood Foundation Annual Benefit Auction. Alara clicked through, curiosity momentarily displacing despair. The webpage was sleek, black background with gold lettering. Make a difference. Change a life. The Blackwood Foundation connects those in need with those who can help. She scrolled further, confusion growing. It wasn't charity auction items being sold, it was people. 1-year employment contracts, the site explained. Individuals facing extraordinary circumstances are matched with benefactors seeking personal assistance. All proceeds go directly to resolving the applicant's financial emergency. Photos showed smiling success stories. A young man who'd received cancer treatment, a woman standing in front of a college she couldn't otherwise afford. The application deadline was tomorrow. The auction was in 3 days. Bile rose in Alara's throat. This was essentially indentured servitude dressed up as charity. People auctioning themselves to the wealthy in exchange for solving their problems. Her phone buzzed again. The hospital. She answered with dread. Ms. Thorne? Caleb's latest results came back. His condition is progressing faster than we anticipated. If you're considering the Boston trial, time is critical. After hanging up, Alara stared at the Blackwood Foundation page still open on her screen. 3 hours later, she'd completed the application. The process had been invasive. Medical documentation of Caleb's condition, financial records confirming her desperate situation, background checks, even psychological assessments conducted through an emergency video call. By morning, she received confirmation. She'd been accepted as a candidate for the upcoming auction. Jenny called when she forwarded the acceptance email. Alara, are you sure about this? The Blackwood Foundation has a reputation. Thaddeus Blackwood runs it. You know, the tech billionaire? People call him the Wolf of Wall Street, except scarier. These aren't normal jobs. You'd basically be owned for a year. What choice do I have? Alara's voice was flat. Caleb will die without that treatment. Just be careful at the auction. These people, they're not like us. They see everything as a transaction. 2 days later, Alara stood in a thrift store dressing room, staring at her reflection in a second-hand black dress that was the best she could afford. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, her face pale with exhaustion and fear. The next night, she found herself in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, surrounded by New York's elite in evening where that cost more than her annual income. She clutched a numbered card in trembling fingers, candidate number 37. On stage, a poised auctioneer with a British accent described each candidate's situation to the champagne-sipping crowd. Bids were called out casually, as if they were bidding on artwork rather than human beings. Next we have candidate number 37, 24-year-old female from Massachusetts. seeking funds for experimental medical treatment for younger brother. Starting bid is $30,000. Alara walked onto the stage, blinded by spotlights, knees threatening to buckle. Silence fell across the ballroom. No one raised their paddles. 30,000, the auctioneer repeated, desperation creeping into his professional demeanor. This young lady's brother will not survive without this treatment. More silence. Someone coughed. Alara felt heat creeping up her neck, humiliation burning through her. 30,000, exactly. A deep voice finally called from the back of the room. Not a penny more. The crowd parted as a tall figure moved forward. Mr. Blackwood, the auctioneer said, voice tinged with surprise. 30,000 is the bid from Mr. Thaddeus Blackwood. Alara's eyes locked with those of her buyer, cold, gray, and utterly devoid of compassion. The murmurs rippled through the Plaza Hotel ballroom as Thaddeus Blackwood strode toward the stage. Women in designer gowns whispered behind manicured hands. Men in tailored tuxedos straightened their postures. The crowd's reaction was visceral, a mixture of fear, respect, and morbid curiosity. Sold to Mr. Blackwood for $30,000, the auctioneer announced, relief evident in his voice. The gavel struck with finality that echoed through Alara's bones. She remained frozen under the harsh spotlight as Thaddeus approached. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Easily 6'3", with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the cutting coldness of his gray eyes. "Follow me," he said, not bothering to look at her as he turned and walked away. A woman in a sleek pantsuit appeared at Alara's elbow. "I'm Vivian Reed, Mr. Blackwood's executive assistant. This way, please." Alara was guided to a private room off the main ballroom where legal documents awaited. Thaddeus stood by the window, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline, phone pressed to his ear. "The funds will be transferred directly to Boston Medical Center tomorrow morning," Vivian explained, sliding papers across the table. "You'll begin work immediately. The contract stipulates." "I can read," Alara said, reaching for the pen. Her fingers trembled as she signed page after page, each signature surrendering another piece of her freedom. Thaddeus ended his call and turned. "Ms. Thorne, you understand the terms? 1 year of service. No days off unless I approve them. Complete discretion regarding my business and personal affairs." She met his gaze steadily. "And my brother gets treatment. That was the arrangement." "Then I understand perfectly." A humorless smile crossed his face. "Somehow I doubt that." He checked his watch. "Vivian will see you to the car. Pack tonight. My driver will collect you at 7 a.m. tomorrow. What about saying goodbye to my family? You can call them from Greenwich." He was already walking away. "Vivian, make sure she has appropriate clothing." "Nothing like that." He gestured dismissively at Alara's thrift store dress. After he left, Vivian's professional mask softened slightly. "Don't take it personally. He's like that with everyone." "Lucky everyone," Alara muttered. The black SUV with tinted windows arrived precisely at 7 a.m. outside Alara's apartment building. The driver, a stoic man named Reynolds, helped load her single suitcase while neighbors watched curiously. Her mother stood in the doorway, confusion clouding her features. "You'll call about Caleb?" she asked for the third time. "Every day, Mom. They're starting his treatment today. Remember what Dr. Reynolds said? This is going to help him get better." Alara hugged her mother, inhaling the familiar scent of drugstore shampoo and coffee. "I'm just going away for work. It's a good job." The lie tasted bitter. The truth, that she'd sold herself to a cold-eyed billionaire, would only confuse her mother more. The drive to Greenwich, Connecticut took nearly 2 hours. Alara watched through the window as urban sprawl gave way to manicured estates and ancient trees. When they turned onto a private road marked only by an understated B on a stone pillar, her stomach tightened. The house that appeared around the final curve was less a mansion than a modernist statement, glass and steel rising from the landscape in clean lines and impossible angles. It looked both completely out of place among the traditional estates of Greenwich and somehow perfectly integrated with the wooded surroundings. "Blackwood residence," Reynolds announced unnecessarily. "Ms. Reed will meet you inside." Vivian was indeed waiting in the soaring entryway, tablet in hand. "Welcome to Glasshaven," she said, using the house's pretentious name with no apparent irony. "I'll show you to your quarters, then give you the tour." Alara's quarters were a minimalist bedroom suite larger than her entire apartment in Ravenswood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a Japanese-inspired garden. The bathroom featured a shower with more settings than her car. Staff uniform, Vivian said, indicating garment bags on the bed. Business casual for day-to-day, formal attire for events. Mr. Blackwood is very particular about appearance. Where is he? Alara asked, fingering the expensive fabric of a blouse that probably cost more than her monthly food budget. Tokyo. Business emergency. He'll return tomorrow afternoon. Vivian consulted her tablet. That gives us time for orientation. Your role is complex, part personal assistant, part household manager when he's in residence. The tour was dizzying. Home office, commercial-grade kitchen, formal and informal dining areas, multiple terraces, home gym, indoor pool, wine cellar, private theater, art gallery. Staff included a chef, groundskeeper, housekeeper, and security team, all of whom lived off-site except during events. The East Wing is Mr. Blackwood's private space, Vivian said when they reached an imposing set of double doors. You'll only enter when specifically instructed. By evening, Alara's head was spinning with protocols, schedules, and passwords. When she finally called the hospital, the news about Caleb was cautiously positive. The first treatment had been administered without complications. She slept fitfully in the too-perfect bed, dreams filled with auction blocks and cold gray eyes. The next day brought intensive training on Thaddeus's systems and preferences. Everything was precise, from the exact temperature of his coffee, 155 degrees Fahrenheit, to the specific phrasing of phone messages. Mr. Blackwood values efficiency above all, Vivian repeated like a mantra. Anticipate needs. Solve problems before they reach him. Never, ever make him repeat himself. By mid-afternoon, Alara's confidence was growing. The job, while demanding, seemed manageable. Just 1 year of her life, and Caleb would have a future. The house alert system chimed softly. Mr. Blackwood has arrived, announced a disembodied voice. Vivian straightened immediately. He's early. Come with me. They met him in the entryway as he handed off his coat and briefcase to the waiting Reynolds. Tokyo? Vivian asked. Done. The board agreed to our terms. His eyes landed on Alara, assessing her in the navy pantsuit from the provided wardrobe. Ms. Thorne, I trust you're settled. Yes, sir. Good. My office, both of you. The Singapore presentation needs revising. 5 hours later, Alara stumbled back to her room, fingers cramped from typing, brain numb from the relentless pace Thaddeus demanded. He'd barely acknowledged her presence, issuing commands without looking up from his work. She collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted even to change clothes. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the hospital. When she finally reached them, the night nurse confirmed the funds had been received and Caleb's treatment schedule was proceeding. Worth it, Alara whispered to the empty room. It's all worth it. She didn't yet understand how high the true price would be. 3 weeks into her employment at Glasshaven, Alara developed a sixth sense for Thaddeus Blackwood's moods. The subtle tightening around his eyes meant an impending business crisis. The tapping of his Mont Blanc pen against his desk signaled impatience. The rare moments when he stood motionless by the windows, staring at nothing, were the most dangerous of all. Today he was tapping the pen. The Mueller portfolio is incomplete, he said without looking up from his tablet. Where are the Q2 projections? Alara checked her notes. You requested Q3 only during yesterday's call. The pen stopped tapping. I need both. I'll have them in an hour. Make it 30 minutes. She nodded, though he wasn't looking, and retreated from his office. In the adjacent workspace she shared with Vivian, she found the older woman watching her with something like sympathy. You're doing well, Vivian said quietly. Most don't last this long. Most what? Assistants. Auction purchases. Vivian's lips thinned. He goes through them quickly, gets bored, finds fault, terminates the contract early. Alara froze. Terminates? What happens to the money? The foundation keeps it, of course. Seeing Alara's expression, Vivian added, Don't worry. Your brother's treatment is already paid for. That can't be reversed. Small comfort. Alara needed the full year's employment to cover Caleb's ongoing care and support her mother. She couldn't afford to fail. She worked through lunch to compile the Mueller projections, delivered them in 28 minutes, and spent the afternoon organizing Thaddeus's upcoming travel schedule. Despite his exacting standards, the work itself wasn't difficult. The challenge was his unpredictability and the absolute isolation of life at Glasshaven. Her new routine allowed one evening call to the hospital and her mother, always from the privacy of her room. Caleb was responding cautiously well to the treatment, though the doctor stressed it was early days. Her mother sounded marginally more coherent, perhaps responding to the glimmer of hope. That evening, Alara was sorting mail in the cavernous living room when she noticed a package labeled "Fragile" among the deliveries. Inside was a crystal sculpture, a delicate falcon with wings outstretched. A card read, "Thaddeus, to commemorate our partnership. Mitchell." She placed it carefully on the side table, making a note to mention it to Thaddeus. As she turned, her elbow caught the edge of the sculpture. It wobbled in seeming slow motion before crashing to the floor, shattering into countless glittering shards. $30,000. Thaddeus stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What?" Alara whispered. "The sculpture. $30,000. He stepped forward, glass crunching under his Italian leather shoes. "Custom made by Swarovski. A gift from my newest investor." "I'm sorry," she said, dropping to her knees to gather the larger pieces. "I'll replace it. I'll find a way." "With what money?" His voice was eerily calm. "You have nothing. I'll work extra. You already belong to me. Every minute of your day is already mine." The words hit like physical blows. Alara looked up at him, a sharp retort rising in her throat. Their eyes locked, his cold and assessing, hers burning with humiliation and anger. Something unexpected flickered across his face. "Leave it," he said abruptly. "The housekeeper will clean up. Go organize the Melbourne files for tomorrow's call." She stood shakily, a shard of crystal still clutched in her palm. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." His eyes dropped to her hand. "You're bleeding." Alara uncurled her fingers. A thin line of blood traced her lifeline. "It's nothing." Without warning, he grasped her wrist, his touch surprisingly gentle. He examined the cut with clinical detachment, then released her. "Have Mrs. Patterson look at that. I need those files by 9. He walked away, leaving Alara staring after him, pulse racing from the unexpected contact. Late that night, unable to sleep, she decided to complete some filing Vivian had mentioned. The house was silent as she made her way to the administrative office adjacent to the main library. The filing cabinets were organized with military precision. As she sorted quarterly reports, a folder labeled Foundation Initiatives caught her eye. Inside were financial statements showing massive anonymous donations to children's hospitals across the country. The most recent was dated just days earlier, $5 million to Boston Children's Hospital's Experimental Treatment Wing, the same hospital where Caleb was being treated. Alara checked the date again. The donation had been made the day after the auction. The next morning, Thaddeus was already in his office when she arrived at precisely 7 a.m. He acknowledged her with a barely perceptible nod. "The Melbourne files are on your desk," she said, "and I've prepared briefing notes for your call with Singapore at 11. He glanced up. "Your hand." The question surprised her. "Just a small cut. Thank you for asking." A moment of awkward silence stretched between them. "I saw the Foundation documents," she said suddenly, immediately regretting her boldness. His expression hardened. "You were going through my files?" "I was organizing, as instructed." She swallowed. "The donations to children's hospitals, including Boston Children's. Is that why you started the auction program? To fund children's health care?" "My philanthropic choices are none of your concern, Miss Thorne, but they affect my brother directly. Your brother receives treatment because I purchased your contract," he interrupted coldly. "My other charitable activities are separate matters." Something didn't add up. Why create such a problematic system, auctioning people in need, when he clearly had the means for traditional philanthropy? What was he getting from this arrangement that simple donation couldn't provide? "Will there be anything else?" she asked, retreating behind professionalism. He studied her for a long moment. "Reynolds will drive you to the hospital on Sunday. You can visit your brother for 2 hours. The unexpected kindness caught her off guard. "Thank you. Don't mistake practical employee maintenance for sentiment, Ms. Thorne." He turned back to his work. "I need you functioning at optimal capacity. Family distraction reduces your efficiency." Even his generosity came wrapped in cruelty. Yet as Alara left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that Thaddeus Blackwood was a far more complex puzzle than she had initially believed, and that the auction, the foundation, perhaps even her selection, were pieces of something larger than she could yet understand. Pack for cold weather, Thaddeus announced on a dreary November morning. We leave for Aspen tomorrow. Alara looked up from her laptop. Aspen, my Colorado property. A week, possibly 2. He handed her a tablet. The Meridian merger is stalling. Key players need persuading in person. The tablet displayed a detailed itinerary, guest list, and event schedule for what appeared to be an elaborate corporate retreat. Names of tech industry titans and venture capitalists filled the roster. You'll handle logistics, coordinate with local staff, and manage schedules, Thaddeus continued. Vivian stays here to oversee the Tokyo acquisition. This would be her first time traveling alone with him. The prospect was both unsettling and strangely exciting. What about my Sunday hospital visit? She asked. Something like irritation flickered across his face. Arrange a video call instead. The Meridian deal is worth billions, and her brother's life was apparently worth less. Alara bit back a retort. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. The Aspen property made Glasshaven look modest. Sprawling across a mountainside with panoramic views of snow-covered peaks, the timber and glass structure blended rugged mountain aesthetics with ultra-modern luxury. Staff greeted them efficiently upon arrival, a well-orchestrated routine that suggested Thaddeus visited frequently. The East Wing is being prepared for guests, explained Mrs. Harding, the house manager. Mr. Blackwood's suite and your adjacent office are in the West Wing. Alara's office turned out to be a comfortable room connecting to Thaddeus's private study. The arrangement offered less separation than she'd grown accustomed to at Glasshaven. The first 3 days passed in a blur of preparations. CEOs and investors began arriving, filling the house with expensive cologne and calculated laughter. Alara coordinated meals, activities, and private meetings where Thaddeus worked his persuasive magic on potential partners. She observed him in this element with reluctant admiration. He was ruthless yet charismatic, commanding respect without seeking approval. Men who ran global companies deferred to him without question. On the 4th night, a snowstorm hit the mountain with unexpected ferocity. The last dinner guests barely made it back to town before the roads closed. By midnight, the property was isolated, with only essential staff remaining on site. Alara was updating schedules in her office when Thaddeus appeared in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of amber liquid. Tomorrow's helicopter tours are canceled, he said, offering her a glass. Weather service predicts 36 hours before clearing. She accepted the drink cautiously. I'll reschedule the Vandermeer meeting for. Leave it until morning. He took the chair opposite her desk. The storm changes our timeline. Sometimes it's necessary to adapt. The whiskey burned pleasantly down her throat. It was surreal to see him relaxed, almost approachable in casual attire, dark jeans, and a charcoal sweater that softened his normally severe appearance. Wesley Harrington arrived this afternoon, Thaddeus said, studying the liquid in his glass. Former partner, now competitor. Watch him carefully. Is there a problem? Wesley believes in leveraging every advantage, including information gathered through questionable methods. You mean corporate espionage? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Among other things, he's particularly interested in the Quantum Initiative. The Artificial Intelligence Project? Thaddeus looked up sharply. You've been reading my files again. Only what crosses my desk for filing, she countered. I'm thorough. Indeed. He finished his drink. Keep Harrington away from my private office. The storm intensified overnight. By morning, snow had drifted against the lower windows, and wind howled around the eaves. With outdoor activities impossible, guests grew restless. Alara spent hours arranging alternative entertainment, wine tastings, poker tournaments, film screenings. Late that afternoon, she noticed Wesley Harrington, a smooth-talking man with calculating eyes, lingering near Thaddeus's private study while others were gathered in the main lodge. Mr. Harrington, she called, approaching with deliberate casualness. The Scotch tasting is beginning in the great room. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Just stretching my legs, Miss Thorne, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. Ah, yes. The auction acquisition. Word gets around. He studied her with unsettling intensity. You know, Thaddeus has a pattern with his assistants, especially the pretty ones. Alara maintained her professional smile. I believe Mr. Reed is looking for you. Something about investment opportunities in Singapore? I'm sure. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Has he told you why he really started the foundation? About the fire? About his brother? Before she could respond, Thaddeus appeared at the end of the hallway. Wesley straightened immediately. Harrington, your absence is delaying the tasting. Just getting acquainted with your lovely assistant. Wesley nodded to Alara before sauntering away. Thaddeus's jaw tightened as he watched him go. What did he say to you? Nothing specific. Something about a fire and your brother? The color drained from Thaddeus's face. Stay away from him. That night, unable to sleep with the storm battering the windows, Alara wandered to the kitchen for tea. The house was silent except for the wind and the occasional creak of timber. Returning with her steaming mug, she noticed light under Thaddeus's study door. She hesitated, then knocked softly. No answer. The door was slightly ajar. Alara pushed it open, intending only to turn off the light. Instead, she found Thaddeus asleep at his desk, head resting on folded arms. An empty tumbler sat beside scattered papers. She should have left immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, noticing how sleep softened the hard lines of his face. As she reached to switch off the desk lamp, he stirred, his cashmere sweater sliding down to reveal his upper back. Alara froze at the sight of jagged scars crisscrossing his skin, old burn marks, unmistakable and extensive. Thaddeus jerked awake, eyes disoriented before focusing on her. He followed her gaze and yanked his sweater back into place. Get out, he said, voice deadly quiet. I'm sorry, I was just... Get out. She retreated quickly, heart pounding. Behind her, something shattered against the wall. Alara barely slept, troubled by what she'd seen and Wesley's cryptic comments. The next morning, Thaddeus was coldly professional, as if the incident had never occurred. The storm had passed, roads were being cleared, and guests would be departing soon. As she coordinated departures, her phone vibrated with an unknown number. Ms. Thorne, a woman's voice. This is Nurse Jenkins from Boston Medical. There's been a complication with Caleb's treatment. We've been trying to reach you. What kind of complication? Alara gripped the phone, stepping away from the bustle of departing guests. He's stable now, Nurse Jenkins assured her. But he had a severe reaction to the latest treatment. We've adjusted the protocol, but Dr. Michaels would like to speak with you directly. I'll call back in 10 minutes, Alara promised, ending the call as Wesley Harrington approached with his luggage. Leaving so soon? She asked automatically, checking his name off her departure list. Wesley's smile was practiced charm. Places to be, companies to acquire. He glanced toward where Thaddeus was speaking with investors. Tell your employer our conversation isn't finished. Some fires never truly go out. The cryptic comment lingered as she coordinated the remaining departures. By afternoon, only 2 guests remained, scheduled to leave the following morning. Alara finally found a moment to call Boston Medical from her office. Dr. Michaels explained that while Caleb's reaction had been concerning, they'd seen similar responses in other trial patients. They would modify his treatment plan, but remained cautiously optimistic. I should be there, Alara said, guilt gnawing at her. You're doing what's necessary for his care, the doctor reminded her. The hospital received another anonymous donation yesterday that's helping fund expanded research directly related to cases like Caleb's. Another donation. The timing seemed significant, coming right after Harrington mentioned Thaddeus's past. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Thaddeus stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. The Kumar meeting is in 30 minutes. Prepare the meridian projections. Yes, sir. She hesitated. Mr. Blackwood, my brother had a complication with his treatment. He's stable now, but do you need to return to Boston? The question surprised her. I would like to, but I understand the merger is critical. He studied her for a moment. The final negotiations conclude tomorrow. We'll return to Connecticut, then you may take 3 days for a hospital visit. Relief washed over her. Thank you. The projections, Miss Thorne. 10 minutes. As he turned to leave, she found herself asking, who was in the fire, Mr. Blackwood? He froze. When he faced her again, his eyes were glacial. That is not your concern. Harrington mentioned, Harrington is a manipulator who uses personal information as leverage. Whatever he implied, disregard it. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Focus on your job, not my past. The final dinner with the Kumar executives that evening was tense, but successful. Thaddeus was at his persuasive best, securing their support for the merger. Afterward, He retreated to his study while Alara finalized travel arrangements. The mountain roads had been cleared, but the weather forecast warned of another approaching system. She arranged for their departure immediately after breakfast, then headed to the kitchen for tea before bed. As she waited for the kettle, she noticed movement through the window, a figure crossing the snowy courtyard toward the garages. The security lights illuminated Wesley Harrington, who was supposed to have left hours ago. Suspicious, Alara grabbed her coat and followed discreetly. The garage doors were open, interior lights on. She slipped inside, staying hidden behind a Land Rover. Wesley was bent beneath Thaddeus's personal vehicle, a custom Range Rover they were scheduled to take down the mountain tomorrow. He appeared to be working on something underneath. "Security upgrade?" she asked, stepping forward. Wesley jerked upright, banging his head on the undercarriage. "Ms. Thorne, unexpected pleasure. You were marked as departed on my list. Change of plans." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Car trouble. Decided to stay another night after all." Alara glanced at the Range Rover. "And Thaddeus's vehicle needed your attention because..." "Just admiring the engineering. I'm considering the same model." His smile was fluid, practiced. "Don't let me keep you from your beauty sleep." When he walked past her, she noticed a tool slipping into his pocket, something that looked like wire cutters. After he left, Alara examined the vehicle but saw nothing obviously wrong. Still, instinct told her something wasn't right. She considered telling Thaddeus, but hesitated. Her accusations against a prominent businessman based solely on suspicion would sound paranoid. She slept fitfully, troubled by Harrington's behavior and Thaddeus's reaction to questions about his past. By morning, she decided to insist on driving separately down the mountain. Breakfast was rushed as the promised storm approached. Alara tried to catch Thaddeus alone, but he was engaged with the final guests. Before she could intervene, he was heading for the Range Rover, keys in hand. "Mr. Blackwood," she called, hurrying after him. "Perhaps we should wait. The weather will beat the storm if we leave now." He opened the driver's door. "The roads are clear. I think we should take separate vehicles." He frowned. "That's inefficient. Get in. I saw Harrington in the garage last night. He was under your car." Thaddeus paused. "Harrington left yesterday." "He stayed. He said he had car trouble, but I think..." "Enough, Ms. Thorne." His tone was dismissive. "Your imagination is..." "He had wire cutters," she insisted. "Please, just have someone check the vehicle before. This is absurd." He got into the driver's seat. "If you're coming, get in now. Otherwise, arrange your own transportation back to Connecticut." Pride and frustration warred within her. Finally, she yanked open the passenger door. Fine. The first 20 minutes of the descent were uneventful. Snow began falling lightly as they navigated the winding mountain road. Thaddeus drove with the same precision he applied to everything. "Boston Medical called again this morning," she said, breaking the silence. "Caleb's responding better to the adjusted protocol." He nodded, attention on the road. "Good." The doctor mentioned another anonymous donation specifically for research related to his condition. His jaw tightened. "Ms. Thorne, it was you, wasn't it? Just like the donations I found in your files. My charitable giving is private. Why help anonymously while publicly buying people at auction?" The contradiction doesn't. She never finished the sentence. As they rounded a sharp curve, Thaddeus pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. His expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. He pumped the pedal repeatedly. The Range Rover continued accelerating down the steep grade. "Brake failure," he said tersely, downshifting to slow their momentum. The maneuver helped slightly, but the vehicle was still moving too fast. Alara gripped her seat as they careened around another bend, tires skidding on the increasingly slick road. Ahead, the guardrail separated them from a sheer drop. "There's a runaway truck ramp half a mile ahead," Thaddeus said, fighting for control. "If we can reach it." A curve appeared too quickly. Despite his skilled handling, the Range Rover slid, sideswiping the guardrail with a horrific screech of metal. The impact sent them spinning. Time slowed. Alara saw the horror on Thaddeus's face as the vehicle smashed through the weakened guardrail, teetering on the edge of the cliff. Below, hundreds of feet of empty space waited. The Range Rover tilted forward ominously. "Jump!" Thaddeus shouted, reaching across to shove her door open. "Now!" Alara lunged for the door as the vehicle began its fatal slide into the abyss. Pain. Disorienting, all-encompassing pain. That was Alara's first awareness as consciousness returned. She lay sprawled on frozen ground, snow melting against her face. Every breath sent fire through her ribs. 20 feet away, the Range Rover's twisted remains smoldered at the bottom of a shallow ravine, not the deadly drop they'd faced, but a smaller depression where the vehicle had rolled after she'd jumped. "Thaddeus," she whispered, struggling to sit up. Panic surged when she couldn't see him. Had he escaped before the car went over? Movement caught her eye, a dark shape halfway between her position and the wreckage. Ignoring her screaming muscles, Alara crawled toward it. Thaddeus lay motionless, one leg bent at an unnatural angle, blood matting his hair. A branch had impaled his shoulder, pinning him to the ground. His face was ghostly white beneath smears of dirt and blood. "Mr. Blackwood?" Her voice sounded strange in her ears. "Thaddeus." His eyelids fluttered. "Miss Thorne." His voice was barely audible. "You're alive. Don't move. You're badly hurt." He coughed, a wet, dangerous sound. "Harrington." It was Harrington. "I know. Save your strength." Alara's phone had shattered in the fall. Thaddeus's was nowhere to be found. The road above was hidden by trees, and the falling snow would soon cover any evidence of their crash. No one would miss them until tomorrow at the earliest. They would freeze to death long before then. Fighting rising panic, she assessed their situation. Thaddeus needed immediate medical attention. She had a dislocated shoulder, probable broken ribs, and a gash on her leg that was soaking her pants with blood. They had no supplies, no shelter, and a storm intensifying by the minute. "I have to get help," she told Thaddeus, tearing strips from her shirt to bind her leg. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't leave. We'll die out here if I don't. You'll die trying to climb that slope." His eyes, though clouded with pain, held hers steadily. The wreckage. Check for emergency supplies. The Range Rover had landed on its side, partially crushed but not completely destroyed. Ignoring the stabbing pain in her shoulder, Alara forced the upward-facing door open and climbed inside. The interior was chaos, shattered glass, deployed airbags, scattered belongings. She found a small emergency kit in the glove compartment and, miraculously, a satellite phone in a protective case that had fallen under the passenger seat. Her hands trembled as she activated it and dialed 911. The connection was weak, breaking up constantly, but she managed to communicate their situation and approximate location before the battery died. "Help is coming," she told Thaddeus when she returned to his side. But it could be hours. Snow was falling heavily now. The temperature dropped with the approaching darkness. Using her coat and the emergency blanket from the kit, she covered Thaddeus as best she could, then examined the branch impaling his shoulder. "It needs to stay in," he said, reading her thoughts. "Removes barrier to bleeding." She nodded, administering the basic first aid she could with their limited supplies. The branch had missed major arteries, but his leg was obviously broken, and she suspected internal injuries from his labored breathing. "Why did you push me out first?" she asked, needing to keep him talking, conscious. His eyes were distant. "Instinct. Most people's instinct is self-preservation." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not mine. Not anymore." The comment sparked her memory of Wesley's cryptic words. "The fire Harrington mentioned. Someone died, didn't they?" Thaddeus was silent so long she thought he'd passed out. Finally, he whispered, "My brother. And it was my fault." Alara leaned closer, brushing snow from his face. "What happened?" "Corporate takeover. Rivals set fire to our server farm." His words were becoming slurred. "Alex went back for backup drives. I tried to stop him." He gestured weakly to his scarred back. "Got these pulling him out. Too late." The ceiling collapsed. The confession seemed to drain what little strength he had left. His eyes closed, his breathing growing more uneven. Alara fought her own exhaustion and pain, knowing if she allowed herself to rest, they might both freeze to death. She checked his pulse regularly, speaking to him even when he couldn't respond, willing him to live. As darkness fell completely, the cold became a living thing, seeping through their makeshift coverings, numbing her extremities. She tucked herself against Thaddeus, sharing what body heat remained between them. "Stay with me," she murmured, her voice hoarse from the cold. "They're coming. Just stay with me." In those brutal hours, something shifted between them. This broken, vulnerable man was not the cold tyrant who had purchased her at auction. The contradiction confounded her, his cruelty and his sacrifice, his demands and his donations. "I misjudged you," she whispered. His eyes opened briefly. "No, you didn't." The distant thrum of helicopter blades was the sweetest sound Alara had ever heard. Somehow, she found the strength to wave the emergency flare, guiding the search and rescue team to their location. What followed was a blur. Being lifted into the helicopter, emergency medical treatment, Thaddeus coding once during the flight to Denver Memorial. She remembered screaming his name as they wheeled him directly into surgery, remembered fighting the nurses who tried to separate them for her own treatment. She woke in a hospital room 3 days later, her body a patchwork of bandages and casts. Her first conscious thought was of Thaddeus. "He's alive," a nurse assured her. "In intensive care, but stable. You saved his life twice out there. First by finding the satellite phone, then by keeping him warm until help arrived." Alara insisted on seeing him, refusing medication until they relented. They wheeled her bed into his ICU room, where machines monitored his vital signs, tubes and wires connecting him to life-sustaining equipment. 5 minutes, the doctor warned. When they were alone, Alara reached across the small gap between their beds to touch his hand, the same hand that had once dismissed her so coldly. His fingers twitched, then curled weakly around hers. His eyes opened, focusing on her with effort. "You're here," he said, voice raw from the breathing tube they'd recently removed. "So are you." A fragile silence stretched between them. When he spoke again, his voice was different, stripped of pretense and power. "I knew who you were before the auction," he admitted. "Your brother's case. I'd been following it." The confession hung in the air between them, a truth that changed everything. "You knew me before the auction?" Alara's throat tightened, her mind racing through implications. "I don't understand." Thaddeus's gaze was steady despite his weakened state. "Boston Medical flags certain cases for research funding. Rare conditions, promising patients. Your brother's file crossed my desk during a foundation review. So Caleb wasn't random. You deliberately chose us." The revelation shifted her understanding of everything that had happened. Why the auction? Why not just fund his treatment directly? Before he could answer, medical staff entered to check his vitals. The head nurse frowned at Alara's presence. "Miss Thorne, you need to return to your room immediately. Mr. Blackwood requires rest and is scheduled for additional tests." Her tone left no room for argument. As they separated the beds despite Alara's protests, Thaddeus reached for her hand. His fingers brushed hers briefly before they wheeled her away. "We'll finish this conversation," he said, his voice barely audible above the medical equipment. Back in her hospital room, Alara stared at the ceiling, replaying Thaddeus's confession. If he'd known about Caleb before the auction, what else had been orchestrated? Had her entire ordeal at Glasshaven been some elaborate scheme? The questions multiplied without answers. A physician's assistant arrived with pain medication, which Alara reluctantly accepted. As the drugs pulled her toward sleep, her thoughts drifted to the mountain, to Thaddeus pushing her from the vehicle first, to his burned body curled protectively around hers in the snow. For 3 days, the hospital staff kept her separated from Thaddeus, citing his fragile condition. She received updates through nurses and doctors, multiple surgeries to repair his shattered leg, procedures to address internal bleeding, concerns about potential spinal damage. His condition remained critical but stable. During those days of enforced isolation, Alara spoke daily with Boston Medical about Caleb. The modified treatment protocol was working better than expected. His blood markers were improving steadily, and though he still faced months of therapy, his prognosis had shifted from guarded to cautiously optimistic. "There's been another substantial donation to the research program," Dr. Michaels informed her during one call. "It's earmarked specifically for cases matching your brother's genetic profile." "Was it from Blackwood Foundation?" she asked. "The donor remains anonymous, but the timing suggests a connection to your situation." On her 4th day in the hospital, a visitor arrived, Vivian Reed, looking uncharacteristically disheveled after rushing from Connecticut. Her normally perfect appearance showed signs of strain. Wrinkled blouse, hair escaping its usual tight bun, dark circles beneath her eyes. "The company's in chaos," she reported, setting a bag of necessities on Alara's bedside table. "The board called an emergency meeting. Police are investigating the crash as attempted murder. Wesley Harrington's disappeared, vanished completely, but forensic evidence confirms he tampered with the vehicle. Have you seen Thaddeus? Vivian nodded, sinking into the visitor's chair. Briefly, he's conscious but in significant pain. The doctors are concerned about potential complications from the surgery on his leg. He may never walk normally again. The news hit Alara harder than expected. The image of Thaddeus, always so commanding and physically imposing, permanently disabled by Harrington's actions, was difficult to process. He's authorized immediate transfer of funds to Boston Medical, Vivian continued. Not just for your brother's current treatment course, but for complete care through recovery, including physical therapy, follow-up appointments, even college funds for when he's well enough to attend. Relief washed over Alara. No matter what happened with her employment or relationship with Thaddeus, Caleb would get the care he needed and a chance at a normal future. There's something else. Vivian hesitated, glancing toward the door as if concerned about being overheard. Miranda Sinclair has assumed temporary control of Blackwood Industries. Who is Miranda Sinclair? Thaddeus's cousin, daughter of his mother's sister. She's next in line according to the company charter if he hadn't recovered or had been more severely incapacitated. I've never heard him mention her. They're not close, but she's his only living family. Vivian lowered her voice further. She's flying in tomorrow to support him during recovery, but there are rumors she's meeting privately with board members. Between us, I don't trust her motives. Never have. Vivian stayed for an hour, helping Alara wash her hair and change into fresh clothes from the bag she'd brought. The simple human contact after days of clinical interactions with medical staff nearly brought Alara to tears. What happens now? She asked as Vivian prepared to leave. That depends on Thaddeus's recovery and what you want. Vivian studied her face. Something changed between you two on that mountain, didn't it? Alara looked away. I'm not sure what happened. Everything feels confused. For what it's worth, Vivian said gently. I've worked for him for 7 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. The next morning, doctors finally authorized Alara's release. Though still bruised and moving painfully with a walking cast on her left leg, she declined the wheelchair and made her way slowly to the elevator. She had one destination in mind, Thaddeus's room in the ICU. She found him awake, propped up slightly in bed, looking markedly better than the last time she'd seen him. The endotracheal tube was gone, replaced by a nasal cannula. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking his improving vital signs. His leg was elevated, encased in a complex external fixation device with pins penetrating the skin to hold shattered bones in place. His eyes found hers immediately as she entered, something unreadable flickering in their depths. You should be resting, he said, his voice stronger than she expected. I've had enough rest. She lowered herself carefully into the chair beside his bed, wincing as the movement pulled at her healing ribs. You were about to explain why you chose me at the auction when we were interrupted. A shadow crossed his face. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Your actions changed my life, changed my brother's life. I deserve to know why. He turned his head to look out the window, where Denver's skyline was visible against the backdrop of distant mountains. For a long moment, he was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if recalling memories he rarely accessed. After Alex died, I established the foundation as penance. The auction program was a test. Of what? Human nature. What people will sacrifice for those they love. His fingers twisted in the hospital blanket. My brother died trying to save worthless corporate data. I couldn't understand his choice. He met her eyes again. When I saw your application, your willingness to essentially sell yourself to save your brother, it triggered something. I needed to understand that level of sacrifice. The explanation felt incomplete, almost rehearsed. Before she could press further, the door opened with a soft swish. A striking woman in her 30s entered, dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit that screamed wealth and power. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe knot at the nape of her neck, her features sharp, yet recognizably similar to Thaddeus's. The same high cheekbones and penetrating eyes, though hers were a cold blue rather than gray. Cousin, she said, voice smooth as velvet. You look terrible. Miranda. Thaddeus's expression closed immediately, all vulnerability vanishing. Disappointed to see me alive? She laughed, the sound practiced and hollow. Always so dramatic. The board sends their best wishes for a speedy recovery. They're eager for updates on your recovery timeline. The Meridian merger is in limbo without your input. Her gaze shifted to Alara, assessing her with cool dismissal from head to toe. And this must be the famous Miss Thorne. Your name has come up frequently in board discussions. Alara saved my life, Thaddeus said flatly. So I've heard. How fortunate she was there when the accident occurred. Something in her tone suggested skepticism, a subtle emphasis on accident that made Alara's skin crawl. Alara rose unsteadily, leaning slightly on her walking cast. I should let you two catch up. Family business. No, Thaddeus said quickly, an unusual urgency in his voice. Stay. Miranda intervened smoothly. Actually, Miss Thorne, I'd appreciate a word privately. Hospital cafeteria in 20 minutes? I have some matters to discuss regarding your continued employment during Thaddeus's recovery. The statement was framed as a request, but delivered as a command. Against her better judgment, Alara nodded. 20 minutes. As she left the room, she heard Miranda's voice drop to an intimate murmur. The board is concerned about the quantum initiative timeline. If you're incapacitated for months. When Alara arrived at the cafeteria, Miranda was already seated at a corner table, 2 untouched coffees before her. She'd removed her suit jacket, revealing an expertly tailored silk blouse that probably cost more than Alara's monthly rent in Ravenswood. Your timing is impeccable, Miranda said as Alara sat awkwardly, maneuvering her cast under the table. The loyal assistant who risked her life to save her employer. The media would eat it up if we allowed the story to leak. Very dramatic. It wasn't calculated, if that's what you're implying. Of course not. Miranda smiled without warmth. But you've certainly benefited. Your brother's entire treatment funded, a generous compensation package being prepared. My cousin can be impulsively generous when emotional. This wasn't about money. It's always about money, Miss Thorne. Or power. Sometimes both. Miranda slid a sleek leather folder across the table. Which is why I thought you should see these before making any decisions about your future with Blackwood Industries. Inside were documents, emails, medical notes, surveillance photos of Alara and Caleb at the hospital months before the auction, reports detailing her financial situation, her mother's mental health history, even her employment records from the diner in Ravenswood. He had you investigated, Miranda said softly, watching Alara's face carefully. Long before the auction, he chose you specifically, orchestrated your participation, ensured you'd be desperate enough to accept his bid. Alara's hands trembled as she flipped through pages of private information. Detailed reports on Caleb's condition dated weeks before her application to the foundation. Background checks on her former employers. Even psychological assessments based on her social media activity. This can't be real. The accident investigation revealed more than just brake tampering. Miranda's voice dripped false sympathy. When police searched Thaddeus's private office at the Aspen property, they found more documentation. He's been obsessed with you. The auction, your employment, it was all manipulation. Why would he do that? You remind him of someone. A woman who rejected him years ago. Miranda shrugged elegantly. My cousin doesn't handle rejection well. He created an elaborate scenario where you would be dependent on him, completely in his power. The papers blurred as tears threatened. Every interaction, every moment of seeming kindness now appeared calculated. Even his sacrifice on the mountain took on a sinister quality. Was he simply protecting his investment? You should leave, Miranda continued. For your own safety. Return to your family. I'll ensure your brother's care continues uninterrupted. Alara stood abruptly, nearly toppling her chair. I need to speak with Thaddeus about this. He'll deny everything, of course. Miranda sighed, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee cup. I'm only telling you this for your protection. The doctors say his head injury may affect his personality. He could become volatile, dangerous even, especially if confronted. Alara grabbed the folder and headed for the elevator, mind reeling. The evidence was compelling, aligned with what Thaddeus had already admitted. Yet something felt wrong, calculated about Miranda's timing and presentation. At Thaddeus's room, she found a flurry of medical activity, doctors surrounding his bed, equipment beeping urgently, nurses moving with practiced efficiency that signaled an emergency. What's happening? She demanded, heart racing. A nurse gently but firmly steered her into the hallway. Unexpected hemorrhaging. They're taking him back to surgery immediately. Is he? The question stuck in her throat. The surgical team is excellent. That's all I can tell you now. For 6 hours, Alara sat in the surgical waiting room, the damning folder on her lap. Occasionally, staff emerged to provide brief updates. The bleeding was extensive. They were working to repair a damaged artery. His condition remained critical. Miranda appeared briefly, expressing appropriate concern before being called away for an urgent business matter that couldn't wait. As she left, Alara noticed her speaking intensely into her phone, expression shifting from manufactured worry to something harder, more calculating. By evening, exhausted and conflicted, Alara returned to the hotel room Vivian had arranged across from the hospital. Thaddeus had survived surgery but remained in critical condition. The doctors were cautiously optimistic but warned of complications from trauma and blood loss. Miranda's revelations and the documents weighed heavily on her mind. Everything she'd begun to feel for Thaddeus now seemed built on lies. The connection she'd sensed on the mountain, the vulnerability he'd shown. Were these manipulations from a man practiced at getting what he wanted? Her phone rang, Caleb's nurse with a video call. She almost didn't answer, then relented. Her brother's face appeared, thinner but with more color than she'd seen in months. Alara, they said you were in an accident. Are you okay? You look terrible. Despite everything, his familiar face brought her first genuine smile in days. I'm fine, buddy. Just some bumps and bruises. How are you feeling? Better. Dr. Michaels says the new treatment is working way faster than they expected. I'm still tired all the time, but I don't feel like I'm dying anymore. His blunt assessment was pure Caleb. Mom's here too. She's having a good day. Her mother appeared briefly in frame, looking clearer-eyed than Alara had seen in years. The medical crisis seemed to have jolted her from her depression. They moved us to a better room, Caleb continued excitedly, with a view and everything. And there's a game room down the hall for when I feel strong enough. Some lawyer came yesterday saying everything's covered now. Even college when I get better. After the call, Alara sat staring at the hospital documents spread across the hotel bed. If what Miranda said was true, Thaddeus had manipulated her family's tragedy for his own purposes. Yet he'd risked his life to save hers during the crash. The contradiction made no sense. Unless Miranda was lying. But why would she fabricate such an elaborate deception? Alara picked up one of the surveillance photos, studying it closely. It showed her walking Caleb into Boston Medical 3 months before the auction. She remembered that day clearly. It was when they'd first learned his condition was deteriorating rapidly. Something about the image nagged at her. The angle was odd, as if taken from a security camera rather than by someone following her. She checked the timestamp and location note. Boston Medical Center, East Entrance, 2:17 p.m., February 12th. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her calendar. February 12th had been Caleb's initial consultation with the specialist. They'd arrived at 2:30 p.m., not 2:17, and they'd entered through the main lobby, not the east entrance. The discrepancy was small but significant. She began examining the other documents more critically, looking for inconsistencies. Several emerged, dates that didn't align with her memory, details about her mother's condition that weren't quite right, employment dates from the diner that were off by several weeks. By morning, Alara had made her decision. She packed her few belongings and checked out of the hotel. At the hospital, she left a brief note for Thaddeus with the nurse. I need time to think. Going to Boston to see Caleb. We'll be in touch when I'm ready. 3 hours later, she was on a plane to Boston, the folder of documents secured in her carry-on. Whether they were real or part of Miranda's manipulation, she needed space to think clearly, away from both of them. And she needed to see her family. What she didn't know was that as her plane took off, Miranda Sinclair was making a phone call from Thaddeus's hospital room, where he remained sedated after surgery. It's done, she said quietly, watching the steady rise and fall of her cousin's chest. She's gone, completely convinced. On the other end, Wesley Harrington laughed. Excellent. What did I tell you? Attack the trust, not the person. They were getting dangerously close. She took the bait completely. Fled to Boston this morning. Miranda moved to the window, lowering her voice further. The board emergency meeting is set for Thursday. With her out of the way and Thaddeus incapacitated, they'll have no choice but to vote for interim leadership. And the quantum initiative patents will be ours by month's end, Wesley agreed. Did she suspect anything? Not a thing. Miranda lied, omitting Alara's careful study of the documents. though she might start asking questions eventually. We should accelerate the timeline. Agreed. And Thaddeus? Miranda turned to look at her unconscious cousin, a cold smile playing at her lips. The doctors say his recovery will be long and difficult. Such a shame if complications were to develop. Be careful, Miranda. No direct action. We need this to look natural. Trust me, Wesley. By the time I'm finished, Blackwood Industries will have a new direction, and no one will ever connect us to what happened on that mountain. As she ended the call, Miranda didn't notice the nurse who had paused outside the door, clipboard in hand, expression troubled by the fragments of conversation she'd overheard. The same nurse who had accepted Alara's note, and who now wondered if she should have mentioned the quiet man who'd arrived after Ms. Thorne's departure. Thaddeus Blackwood's most trusted security officer, requesting private time with his employer. 3 weeks after fleeing Denver, Alara sat beside Caleb's hospital bed in Boston, watching her brother's dramatic improvement. The documents Miranda had given her lay spread across her lap, each one analyzed and cross-referenced through her own research. Her phone rang, Vivian's third call today. She ignored it again. You should answer, Caleb said, observing her with the peculiar wisdom of children who faced mortality. You're miserable without knowing the truth. It's complicated. It's not. You care about him. Before she could respond, her mother entered with coffee. The woman who had been lost in grief for years now moved with purpose, eyes clear and focused. There's a man in the lobby, she said. Says he works for Mr. Blackwood. Security officer named Reynolds. Alara found Reynolds waiting, his usual stoicism replaced with urgency. Miss Thorne, I need you to come with me. Mr. Blackwood is in danger, Miranda said. Miranda Sinclair and Wesley Harrington have been working together for months. The brake tampering was just the beginning. We have evidence they're planning something worse. Reynolds showed her surveillance footage of Miranda meeting with Wesley days before the accident, forensic analysis proving the documents had been doctored, phone records showing their ongoing conspiracy. Why should I trust you? Because Mr. Blackwood predicted she would do this. He left instructions if anything happened to him. Reynolds handed her a sealed envelope. He wrote this the day before you left Glasshaven for Aspen. Inside was a letter in Thaddeus's precise handwriting, detailing his suspicions about Miranda and Wesley's plan to steal the quantum initiative technology. More shocking was his confession. He had known of Alara before the auction, but not for the reasons Miranda claimed. My brother sacrificed himself for something he believed in. Thaddeus had written, When I saw you willing to sacrifice your freedom for your brother, I recognized what Alex had tried to teach me. I needed to understand that kind of love. I still don't deserve it, but I'm learning. 24 hours later, Alara walked into Blackwood Industries' Manhattan headquarters during an emergency board meeting. Miranda was mid-presentation, Wesley beside her, both freezing when Alara entered with Reynolds and a team of FBI agents. This meeting is private, Miranda snapped. Actually, Alara said, sliding a flash drive across the conference table, I think the board should see this evidence of conspiracy, attempted murder, and corporate espionage before voting on new leadership. 1 year later, Alara stood in the same Plaza Hotel ballroom where her journey had begun, now transformed into a gala fundraiser for the renamed Blackwood Medical Research Foundation. The space hummed with genuine philanthropy rather than performative charity. Thaddeus approached slowly, his cane barely noticeable now after months of physical therapy. The man who had once purchased her at auction now looked at her with undisguised admiration. Ready? He asked. Together they took the stage, announcing the foundation's new direction, direct funding for rare disease research, scholarships for patients like Caleb, who stood beaming in the front row beside their mother. After the applause, Thaddeus led Alara to a quiet corner, lowering himself carefully to one knee. I once bought your servitude, he said, opening a small velvet box. Now I'm asking for your partnership, freely given. Alara's answer was everything they had both been seeking: redemption, understanding, and finally, love that asked for nothing in return.